As Dennis Shanahan wrote in The Australian yesterday, Julia Gillard's leadership is now in name only. Shanahan reported from Canberra that Gillard's supporters are abandoning her in despair, and they now concede that they made a mistake when they helped to oust Kevin Rudd. She's lost, but not that there's anything to offer from Kevin Rudd, I can tell you. But anyway, they got no one to offer. But she's lost public support and she's lost internal party support. There is no challenge. There is no one. She's finished. But she'll go down not just as the worst Prime Minister, but as the most dishonest. It's a terrible thing to say. It's only a couple of months ago, remember, when the private health insurance rebate was torpedoed. Everything's torpedoed to reach a budget surplus. The foreign aid promise is going to be torpedoed. We'll make the poor people of the world pay for Julia Gillard wanting a surplus. She was asked back in 2006 about the private health insurance rebate, are you going to look again at the private health insurance rebate? Her answer, no. The private health insurance rebate will be staying under Labor. The private health insurance rebate will stay. We know what happened to that. Same thing happened to the carbon tax. Same thing as the promise in writing she made to Wilkie on poker machine reform. These are barefaced lies. Dreadful to think that this is the way your country is being run, and I've just highlighted to you about the ANU Vice-Chancellor and the threats to their so-called climate change scientists. The death threats didn't exist, but they occupied the headlines. Well, now business with every other cost that they have to navigate are having to report their carbon dioxide emissions. How the hell these are measured, we're not told. But the Auditor General has found that 72% of the reports by the government's bully boys had significant errors. One business has already spent $1.5 million on compliance. Remember the advertising campaign for the carbon tax, 20 pages, 10 million households, millions of dollars of your money, 99 claims about climate change. The Auditor General found 32 of them couldn't be supported. Now, I don't trust Treasury on anything, but when they say that the cumulative loss of production under a carbon tax will be 32 billion by 2020, you can rest assured of one thing, it's completely underestimated. 32 billion. Even Treasury says real wages will be cut by 1%. So if you're on $70,000, you'll lose $700 a year. Remember the Australian Workers' Union boss Paul Howes famously boasted last year, this carbon tax won't cost a single job. And here we are with the carbon tax looming and thousands of jobs are being lost everywhere. The steel industry, the motor vehicle industry, the retail industry, people are paralysed with fear as to what this is going to do. The aluminium industry, Alcoa said 2 months ago they could no longer provide the cheap electricity that fuels the aluminium industry. We're going to tax coal production here, which will make our electricity hopelessly dearer, but we'll export the same coal to China so they can produce cheap electricity, and then we'll tell our businesses that they have to be able to compete with China. Then there's a mining tax on iron ore and coal, and they're the two components in the making of steel. The nation is being run by vandals. Terry McCrann said to me on this program not long ago, the carbon tax is the most bizarre, dumbest, single greatest attack on our citizenry ever in our nation's history. Then you've got this fool Flannery who said in 2006, new evidence reveals the ice caps are melting faster than previously thought. Only urgent action can save our coastal cities. The Arctic ice cap may have entered a death spiral that will see it melt entirely in summer within the next 5 to 15 years. A complete and utter lie. Currently, there is a record amount of sea ice in the Bering Sea for this time of year, so much so that it's affected the snow crab season, with sea ice covering most of the fishing grounds in the Bering Sea, and more than half of the fleet are tied up in harbour because of the ice. Antarctic sea ice continues to grow and is currently above average for this kind of year. In other words, there's more sea ice, not less, completely debunking the theory of global warming melting the polar ice. You don't read this stuff published anywhere. It won't be on Q&A or on the ABC. We're a patient lot to cop all of this. A couple of months ago, I spoke to a young London journalist, James Delingpole. He's an English writer, he's a broadcaster, and he's sitting right here beside me. He's now in Australia, launching the Australian version of his book called Killing the Earth to Save It. How environmentalists are ruining the planet, destroying the economy, and stealing your jobs. And he doesn't miss. Carbon taxes, he tells us, won't make the slightest difference to climate change, so why are we introducing them? Polar bear populations, he says, are on the increase, so why are we worrying about them? Global warming, he says, is better than global cooling, so why are we trying to stop it? Dr. William Gray, the Professor Emeritus of Atmospheric Science at the Colorado State University, said of James Delingpole's book, quote, Once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. Your book, in my view, is the absolute best thing ever written on the AGW question. That's anthropogenic global warming. Quote, I bow down to you in sincere gratitude for what you've accomplished in this book. A great contribution to the people of the world. The book's called Killing the Earth to Save It. He's right here with me. James, welcome to Australia, and thank you for what you've done.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for the welcome you Aussies have been giving me. It's been fantastic. I love this place.
How much longer do we have to endure all this stuff?
Well, worst case scenario 2013. In Australia, maybe it's going to collapse even sooner than that.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, in terms of the global warming scam, these guys have fixed it, so it will go on forever. After we've dealt with the CO2 myth, they'll move on to ocean acidification, and after ocean acidification, when they've shown that the barrier reef isn't about to melt or anything due to man's evil and selfishness, they'll move on to sustainability or whatever. These guys are using environmentalism as a way of advancing the agenda of the left. It is about control, it is about regulation, it is about wealth redistribution. These guys are essentially Marxists in green clothing. They are watermelons.
You wrote, and I remind my listeners of this, James wrote in the Daily Mail in London in February, quote, just imagine a world where you never had to worry about global warming, where the ice caps, the drowning Maldives, and the polar bears were all doing us fine. Imagine a world where CO2 is our friend, fossil fuels were a miracle we should cherish, and economic growth made the planet cleaner, healthier, happier, and with more open spaces. And then you said, actually, there's no need to imagine it. It already exists. Why are these zealots trying to destroy it?
Because I reckon the world divides into two kinds of people. Those of us who love life, who love our children, who have faith in the human species, and the other half who are the wowsers, the killjoys, the control freaks, who can't look at somebody enjoying themselves without wanting to make new regulations, without wanting to take away their money and spend it on noble causes, on welfare or on wind farm scams for the union superannuation funds. It is a massive scam.
You wrote and asked this question, how come against so much evidence, everyone from the BBC to your kids' teachers, to people in the Cameron government and the Gillard government and the Prince of Wales continue to pump out this message that man-made climate change is a threat? I mean, there's been no global warming since 1987.
And it's interesting, you mentioned all these distinguished figures and institutions. For example, NASA, the organisation that put a man on the moon, is now dedicating itself to pumping out junk science. All we've got on our side is talk radio and the internet. Those are the two things where we can get the story out, like the story this morning in the Australian about those fake emails.
Just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you still getting violent messages on Twitter or by email?
Yeah, I've never had, I'm like these scientists, I've never had an actual death threat. But I do get hate mail, but I don't feel the need to exaggerate to...
Absolutely. No, you're comfortable about the case you're arguing.
Yeah.
You talk all about this in the book. Manipulation of evidence, suppression of evidence, attempts to disguise the inconvenient truths. In any other environment, these things would be exposed and vilified and condemned.
Absolutely. If, for example, these scientists and organisations like Greenpeace had to obey the same compliance rules that the mining industry does, for example, these crooks would be in prison by now. They are a bunch of liars, and they get away with murder because in the mainstream media they are very rarely questioned.
Or if Thatcher or Howard or Abbott or someone said that,
yeah,
they'd be carted out from one end of the earth to the other, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You say in the book how to create scientific climate in which anyone who disagrees with global warming can be written off as a crank whose views don't have a scrap of authority. The reality is, of course, that the authority is the evidence is with those who are condemning the global warming hoax.
One of the things I really like about being an evil climate change denier, not that I do deny climate changes all the time, one of the great things is that I have truth on my side.
Yes.
These guys are a bunch of liars, of cheats, of crooks, and it's wonderful. Every day I can go out there knowing that I'm fighting for the cause of truth, and these guys are the baddies.
Yeah. President Obama described the IPCC as the gold standard.
Yeah, right.
But they don't read these people, do they? They just read what's put in front of them.
Yeah.
And of course there is money available to anyone who propagates this theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the. I think one of the biggest scandals of our time are the wind farms that are being put up all over Australia, all over the world.
Yes.
You know, the union super funds are heavily invested in these monstrosities. People's lives are being ruined. I went to interview people who lived at the foot of a wind farm in Waterloo in South Australia. They could not sleep at night. They had to drive miles from their homes in order to be able to get a night's sleep. This is a scandal. And why?
A scandal.
Yeah.
It is a scandal. And of course, all of this subsidised by taxpayers' money, I might add.
Absolutely, because wind farms don't generate electricity, hardly.
Absolutely. And then you've got nincompoops here like this Flannery. He's our Australian of the Year.
Ah, yes, like Tim Flannery. I'm suggesting that when Abbott gets into power, he should appoint a climate decommissioner to undo all the damage that Flannery has done as climate change commissioner. And I'll bet they'd do it for a lot less than $180,000 a year for a 3-day week.
He said the capital cities of Australia would run out of water. Others told us that children in London would never see snow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is frightening and alarming.
Well, here we are in
Kids
Brisbane.
are taught this in school.
Brisbane spent, what was it, how many billion, or a billion on a desalination plant to deal with the water that would never come back. And then what happened? These biblical floods that Flannery somehow failed to predict.
But what are we doing about teaching kids in classrooms that CO2 is a pollutant? I mean, even the title of all of this is a lie. It's not a carbon tax. It's a carbon dioxide tax.
Absolutely.
And they do the ads and they got all these plumes of smoke and everything coming out as if it was London in the 1940s. That was carbon.
Yeah.
This is carbon dioxide, but kids are taught this before they're taught anything else.
Carbon dioxide is plant food. It always has been plant food. It's good for the planet. You know, it helps plants grow. We need more of it. We should be trying to produce, boost our carbon dioxide levels, not decrease them.
You've got all those climate change or climate gate scientists who lied about the evidence. Yeah. Why aren't they in the dock?
That's the $100,000 question. Yeah, why aren't they in the dock? They should be. We should have a climate Nuremberg.
A climate Nuremberg. You're right. Because not only have they lied to us, but they've taken our money as well. You have these 2 pages in the. I mentioned this to you. Where's the book here? The 2 pages. It's frightening, really. On now I've forgotten what pages they are. So in the book, which just alarmed me. I was reading this last night, quite frankly, and where you outline and highlight. I think there are 70 something. Can you remember what pages they are? I told you before when we were off here. But 74 and 75. Here we are. And you highlight the money that's been poured into this hoax. And the one at the end here where it says is the 2008 estimate by the International Energy Agency on the cost of halving global man-made CO2 emissions by 2050, $45 trillion.
That's 2008 as well. You can imagine the figure's probably doubled since then.
And millions of dollars poured out everywhere.
Yeah.
When are we going to win this battle in the minds of the public?
Oh, I think the public are with us already. I think the public are sick and tired of it. The real problem are the politicians. How do we get them on side? Because,
they're terrified.
In Britain, we've got my allegedly conservative Prime Minister promising to lead the greenest government ever. He's supposed to be a conservative.
Yes.
So when Abbott gets into power, you've got to hold him to account.
Yes.
You've got to make sure not only the carbon tax is scrapped, but also the mining tax. These are based on nonsense.
Your motto, of course, makes you the hope of the side. Illegitimi non carborundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. I've spoken several times on this program to Professor Richard Lindzen. He is an American atmospheric physicist, distinguished, the Alfred Sloan Professor of Meteorology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. You quote him at the beginning of chapter 10, and let me share this with my listeners. Quote, as far as I can tell, the debate is not, by and large, a debate about science. There is broad agreement over major scientific facts among experts, who therefore have difficulty even understanding the existence of this view. There is broad misunderstanding by many, including non-specialist scientists. The debate is a matter of spin control and intentional misrepresentation. The bulk of relevant information suggests little warming.
Yeah.
But of course there's money in arguing that case, isn't there?
It's always a case of follow the money. That's why they're lying to us. That's why the politicians are involved in all these scams.
And of course, while ever money is being poured into the CSIRO and those outfits in Australia to present and propagate the Gore line or the Gillard line, they'll keep saying it to get the dough.
Yeah. Well, look,